And now for something completely different.
Hi everyone, my name's Gheeotine, and I have a story to tell you. You see, prior to last week's upload, I'd been gone for 2 weeks, partially due to a slightly disrupted work schedule, but also due to the fact that I've been undergoing a bit of an evolution with some of my hobbies, particularly in the world of PC gaming. For the longest time, since the days of the Sega Genesis, I've mostly been a console user. That's not to say I avoided PC gaming, but consoles were usually more streamlined on a side of usability and user interface. However, as time went on, I became more familiar with navigating the PC environment. Around the PS3 360 era, I got hooked on things like TF2 and Minecraft, the latter of which I almost failed college because of while it was still in beta. Sorry, Mom. But with that in mind, I was just a user. Tech support beyond Google searches was beyond my grasp, and if anything, the shiny world of hardware comprehension was outside of my wheelhouse. For me, my mind was locked to that binary method of thinking that consoles operate on. Does a game work, or does it not? I'm somewhat happy to say that that's no longer the case. So stick around and I'll tell you how I became a PC builder through one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made. Now, up until recently, my gaming rig was a 2018 pre-built from iBuyPower, and while it was capable of running all games I play on very respectable settings, some parts were getting a little long in the tooth. I upgraded the memory for when I edited videos, the graphics card to keep my more intense games buttery smooth, and a drive for storage, but there were still things I wanted. What prompted the final change was actually two things. First was a coworker gifting me not one but two PC tower cases, and the other being a nostalgic piece of kit from my childhood. Now, who remembers the Hot Wheels PC? Actually, who was even alive during the Hot Wheels PC? Anyway, my mom had a friend who had kids the same age as me, and I remember he had the legendary Hot Wheels computer. We played it for hours, and the unique case and color scheme left an imprint on me that recently started clawing its way back into my consciousness. Being the collector and sucker for nostalgia that I am, when those memories finally did break surface, I began surfing eBay to see if I could get one. Unbeknownst to me, around the time of the pandemic, something happened that would make things quite frankly silly. Anyone who knows anything about PC building has likely heard of the channel Linus Tech Tips, and he at one point put out a bounty for a complete Hot Wheels setup for, get this, $5,000 US. According to him in a subsequent video, he only ended up paying $1,900, but the damage was done. Everyone who had pieces of the Hot Wheels machine thought they had pure gold on their hands. Even a non-functioning tower alone was being listed on eBay for $800. Yeah, a hard no from me. Or so I thought. Over time, the price of the $800 tower slowly began to decrease, but it was never listed for lower than $700. Thankfully, the buyer eventually added the option to make an offer, and so I did. A bit of haggling later, and for a significantly less painful but still irritating $300, I found myself as the owner of a busted-ass, non-functional hunk of heavily stylized metal and plastic from the late 90s. However, that's only where I started, because I have a particular philosophy that I operate on. I don't like things that lack function and simply sit around for the aesthetic. That's also why I despise the Kardashians. Getting back to the story, I got it in my head that I would make a modern machine out of this old piece of junk. This was prompted by a video from a channel that goes by ShankMods. He showed it could be done, and the video was immensely helpful for the sake of information, but there were some caveats I had to bear in mind. Firstly, and most importantly, I needed to maintain a budget, where in ShankMod's videos, he was sponsored by Micro Center, so I had to opt for a much heavier balance between value and performance. Secondly, I was going to have to acquire a lot of knowledge. ShankMod's video, as mentioned, was a great starting point, but I'd need more. My answer to this was to join a couple PC building social media groups. Fortunately, one I joined has been really supportive and great for assistance, for the most part anyways. As is the case with social media, there's always a couple contrarian or off-putting individuals or some graduate of the Dunning-Kruger School of Expertise lurking in the corners, but as I said, most of my experiences have been pleasantly constructive. Thirdly, and finally, I was going to need to overcome the intimidation factor. What I mean is, while I could swap in a part or two, whenever I looked into a PC case, I'd see the massive circuit boards and wires and only think, oh man, I am 100% going to mess up something. In overcoming this, I have to thank my friend Pat in helping me to do a full case transfer. In having someone already familiar in the process of PC building willing to guide me, I had insurance and an increased degree of comfort. So, having spent a few hours diving in with a guiding hand, the intimidation factor kind of fell away. With the planets now aligned, I moved on to begin my first from-the-ground-up build. I ordered all the parts and in some cases reordered parts. Remember kids, measure twice, buy once. That's how the saying goes, right? Now, to go into some detail on the Hot Wheels case and how it affected the build, the case is goddamn horrible. Ventilation is atrocious, and the components are so packed together that, especially when it comes to the space around the graphics card, clearances are a matter of singular millimeters. I would take out the internal chassis to show you how it is now, but given how much difficulty I had in getting everything to align in a way that didn't interfere with fans and wires, I will only open this thing up again if I absolutely have to. If you're curious about parts, I picked a modest processor to keep the heat down with a Ryzen 5 2600, and the graphics card is a low-profile RTX 3050. I also got 16 gigs of RAM that even matched the color of the case. Because I didn't make this project hard enough for myself in regards to space, I elected to keep the media drives. So I upgraded the CD drive to a DVD drive, and I even got adapters to get the floppy drive to work on modern components. For storage, I opted for a 500GB Samsung 970 EVO Plus M.2 SSD, and for secondary storage, a 1TB Western Digital Green 2.5 SSD. Finally, the motherboard is an Asus Prime A320 board, and it's all powered by a Seasonic 650 fully modular power supply. I also went overboard gathering fans. I had to mount the power supply at a 90-degree angle to make it fit, and as such, opted to go from a single 80mm fan to dual 60mm fans. I also gathered 5 40mm fans for intake from the front and bottom. Funnily enough, several of the fans were taken from old scam peripherals from the late 90s in the form of hard drive coolers. Finally, in order to make things fit the way I wanted, I had to cut into the case. With the purchase of a $30 Dremel from Walmart and some safety glasses, I went at it. I then took an afternoon to assemble everything and install windows, but in the end it all came together. I'll admit, the back could look prettier, but it is also entirely functional and does exactly what I hoped. Testing games and utilities I use, the CPU and graphics card never got above 50 degrees Celsius, well within safe operating capacity for modern components. It's a modern system, and it can play the games that I like, from a hunk of useless plastic to what I'm now using as a backup computer. And now, it's lit a fire in me. Since I finished, I've made another computer just because I could, and I've got at least 2 more planned for friends. Hell, I might decide to give away a low to mid-level gaming tower for this channel, but now I'm getting ahead of myself. If you'll allow me to begin to wind down, I want to make a few things clear. I'm not switching to a PC building or hardware channel. I just wanted to share something that got me impassioned, and at the very most, I now have another topic to talk about. In fact, if you like that kind of stuff, then let me know and I'll add it to the regular cycle of content. But on that note, I'll see you next week. Hey, thanks for sticking around all the way to the end. Remember that I give away Steam keys with my regular weekly uploads, and all you have to do to enter is leave a comment and have contact info on your YouTube profile. But as always, thanks for watching and keep your head on your shoulders.